Wow, is the 4% rule finally dead? Might depend on who you ask, but let's talk through that in the next video. So let's talk through this 4% rule. I'm Roger Kiger. I've been a financial planner for about 30 years, helping people build their wealth and protect their legacies. So the Wealth and Whiskey channel is about unwrapping some things that are either unclear or maybe our industry doesn't do a good job talking about. Because I feel like there's always a different side to the story that most investors should really understand a little bit better. So why would I do that? Because frankly, there's a lot more to investments and financial planning than a lot of people realize. And our industry is pretty well motivated by earning money and commissions in ways that the general investing public doesn't understand. So we're going to talk through all those aspects of it. But today's topic is more about an old adage that says, if you take 4% out of your investment account for the rest of your life, the money will last you forever. And you won't touch the principal so that it will be there by the time you pass away. It will be there for your spouse or your family or your legacy, whoever you decide to give that wealth to, right? So when I say it might be dead, there are some people saying, no, you need to spend more money than that. Maybe you should take a higher percentage. Is 4% dead because maybe you should take 6 or 7 or 8%? Those are the pieces we're going to unwrap a little bit. But let's clarify the 4% rule and what works about it and what doesn't work about it before we look at some other alternatives or a way to, either approve or disapprove of the 4% rule. So again, in theory, if you said, I want to take just the earnings or the interest or some small amount of money out of my account, but I want to leave the principal for my heirs or my spouse or my family. 4% distribution rate sort of assumes that the account, all the money is invested in a 50-50 stock to bond allocation, or maybe 60-40 or even 70-30. You have to have those stocks to earn maybe 7 or 8% as an annual average, right? So if you're earning 8% as an average in your accounts over 20 or 30 years, you have 4% for inflation and 4% for distribution. So on $1 million account, let's say, and we'll use $1 million for our discussions because I think it's a little bit simpler. But on $1 million account, if you earn 7%, that's $70,000 a year. If you leave 3% or leave $30,000 in the account, so for next year, so that it grows for inflation, and you take out 4%, that's $40,000 a year you can take out each year. Next year, you start with $1,030,000. 4% of that is a little bit more money, so your income adjusts for inflation a little bit each year. But in theory, as long as you earn that 7% every year, the 4% rule works, right? So that's a straight line calculation. It's a lot of flat assumptions, which is one of the parts that just never work because nothing stays the same. Nothing is a straight line return or calculation. And it depends on so many factors. It depends on how the money's invested. It depends on the timing of when you take some of the money out. It depends on if you take out more in the front or more in the back end of the time period. It depends on how it's invested. So we're going to talk through those at a high level. We won't get too deep in the weeds. But a couple of the issues with that theory of taking 4% and leaving 3 or 4% so that it grows every year, here's a couple challenges. Number one, most of the people that I know, when they retire, they don't want to spend all their time sitting around not doing anything. So we call that the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. Because when you first retire, you want to go do stuff. You want to spend some of the money you've worked hard all your life for. You want to go travel or see your family or enjoy life because those are your golden years. So by and large, as long as I've been doing this for 30 some odd years, people want to retire and do stuff and spend a little more money on the front end. So and then as we age, we slow down a little bit. Those are the slow go years. We're less inclined to go travel abroad. We might travel, to the next state, but we're not going to spend as much money doing the activities that we did when we first retired. So the income that you need is a little bit less. And then we call them the no-go years, where as we age and get older in, whatever age that is, late 70s, 80s, 90s, a lot of times we just don't want to do anything. We don't spend as much money. We don't go out to eat as much. We don't buy things like we used to. It's okay. It's a natural part of life. But maybe we only need 2 or 3% of the account as income during that time period. So that's where the distribution, maybe it starts at 6%, goes to 4%, goes to 2%. Does that work for an average as 4%? Maybe, but not really, because there's a timing involved in that. And the timing means what happens if there's a big market correction or you have a big expense. For example, let's use a fixed dollar amount. Well, back to the $1 million example. If you're taking 4%, that's $40,000 a year as income. But in a 70-30 allocation with 70% of your account invested in the stock market, let's assume there's a 30% stock market correction, right? So now you just took a 25% reduction in your account value. So now your $1 million is $750,000. If you keep taking the $40,000, now you're taking 5% or more out of the account, and it depends on how long it takes that account to recover. So if you continue taking the same dollar amount, and you don't adjust your income down, don't adjust the percentage down based on the account value, you will obviously start pulling off of the principal. And I have seen this happen where that gets to where it is unsustainable, right? And you can actually deplete the account pretty quickly if you don't take the market volatility or big expenses into that calculation. So something happens to the house, or you want to retire and add a $100,000 addition to your house. Well, if you keep the 4% rule at $40,000 that was $1 million, now you only have $900,000, it's more than 4%. So again, you get the point. Once you start drawing on the principal, it gets to where you're drawing more and more off of the principal each year, and you just really never catch up. But the opposite is true as well. So if you need $40,000 and the market goes up, you keep taking $40,000, well, clearly the account's going to continue to grow even faster. If you take 4% of a higher value, then the same principle holds true about having that principal left at the end of the time period. But most people don't want their income to fluctuate with market cycles, which is why they try to fix it at some dollar amount that's stable throughout retirement. So, the 4% rule is kind of tough to just assume that it's going to work because there's so many variables that are constantly changing, right? And all this assumes that the accounts are not impacted by some large expense for, say, long-term care. That's probably the one expense that we've seen impact somebody's financial net worth because it wasn't planned for appropriately. Because if, back to the $1 million example, if you're taking $40,000 a year in income and Social Security and you're comfortable with that, that's great. Until somebody goes into a long-term care facility and they have to pay $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month to cover that facility, then all of a sudden it gets really expensive and you start pulling down the principal. So all this comes back to everything we've talked about to this point, keeping the principal available for your legacy, for your family, for your heirs at the end. So maybe that's not a big deal, right? Maybe you want to spend it before you go. Well, if that's the case, then take 6%. Or don't worry about the 4% rule quite so much. And that's part of the theory behind some of these annuities that say, we're going to guarantee you 7%, 8% for the rest of your life. Well, what they're really doing in most cases, and I don't want any financial advisors to get upset with me, but in most cases, to get that kind of return, that return is part of your principal and some of your interest. So they're converting your account to a pension. This says on $1 million, we're going to give you 7%. So we'll give you $70,000 a year for the rest of your life. It's a great deal, right? Sounds like it to me. The difference is the money's gone upon your death. There's nothing left over at the end. That works out really well if you live a long time and beat the statistics. It works out not so well if you die early and you don't live as long as the statistics. So I'm not a huge fan of converting investment accounts into an annuity and leaving them there forever. Because once you annuitize an account, you really can't undo it. There's no such thing as unannuitizing it, right? So it's there. And once you turn on that income, you really can't turn it off. It's fixed and you can't change it. So I think that's tough to do it that way for a lot of accounts, but make sure you know what you're buying or what you're doing when you look at those guaranteed income percentages, because the fine print does matter. And you don't want to get too far down the road before you figure out that maybe I should not have done that. There's a lot of quote unquote financial advisors that guarantee these high return rates and say, oh, forget the 4% rule. We're going to give you 7 or 8%. They'll guarantee that because, frankly, it's a great commission product for the advisor. They make a lot of money to sell those types of products. I'm biased. Clearly, if you watch any of my other videos, you'll understand that pretty quickly. There is a place for annuities. And if there is a place where they fit, they can work really, really well. More times than not, it's not the right investment for the bulk of your assets. So do the spreadsheets, run the financial plans, right? Project this stuff out and revisit it once or twice a year, because it's really not that difficult to see how much you've made, how much you've spent, and how that's going to impact your account values in the long term, right? As long as you're pretty close to staying even, if you want to keep that money till the end, it's pretty easy to adjust those distributions on an annual basis to make sure that the money's doing what you want it to do and it's working for you. So does the 4% rule work? Maybe it's a guideline, but I come back to what I have been saying throughout our video series, is that you got to watch it. You got to be diligent. You have to pay attention. Success with these financial strategies isn't easy. It takes time, patience, a lot of attention, and a little bit of work. So if you're comfortable with that, you can work these numbers to where the money will absolutely work in your benefit. If you're not comfortable with that, talk to an advisor and get their guidance on those kinds of things. So we'll wrap it up there. I hope this has been helpful. And, we're really big believers in making sure that you're dealing with your financial journey in the way that works for you, right? So to start that journey, feel free to download the Legacy Blueprint in the link below. Right, like and share our channel, because we'd like for you to be notified when we do these discussions. We don't want you to miss any of them. So I'm Roger Kiger. I very much appreciate your time and your willingness to listen to our discussions. So until next time, we'll see you again. Cheers.